Okay, sorry.
You didn't thank yourself, Reagan. So I will thank you for the rest of the board for all the work you've done on this. It's really been, I know, I think whatever we've done is like times 10 in what you've done. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. Okay, and so next up is our superintendent report.
Thank you. Okay, we'll get that PowerPoint up and going. So these are pictures from evenings that we've already heard about, the Art Tech Rock concert. Talk about another partner, the where is Principal Dressler? The Youth Music Project. What a wonderful venue that they set that aside. We do pay a small rental fee, but it's so small compared to what we get out of that. I know they reduced that fee for us, but it's great for our families to be there. And if you've been there, it's just such a great venue and an amazing sound system. The kids did a tremendous job, and Matt is such a champion of their talents. And then, of course, our Dia de los Muertos. So you can go ahead, Joe. Thank you. You've mentioned all the events. I forgot to put band concerts that I've been to and choir concerts, but, of course, all the fall sports events. And even got to squeeze in a volleyball playoff game on Saturday, and got to get there right at 5 o'clock to see our girls advance, Wilsonville girls advance. Unified sports is always a tremendous activity to be a part of and to see. This was our middle schoolers playing soccer at Rosemont. The weather wasn't cooperating, so we moved it indoors, and actually it was a better venue. Josh was there, and so was Jennifer, and kind of made it a little more intimate. And then the junior cheerleading team came out, so they had pom-poms and a little tunnel for all the players. It didn't matter which team they were on, and so it really felt like a sporting event. And united both those schools. It was Meridian Creek and Rosemont, and so a great event. And then I don't know if you saw the thank you card. Last month we recognized our Chinese teachers, and in a true spirit of generosity, they have thanked you back for thanking them. So now it's your turn to thank them for the thank you of the thank you. But there's a lovely card in there and some little treats. And we were able to host a Chinese tea ceremony and gathering together with staff who have been to China and those who also support the program. So I want to thank Dr. Soyson for helping organize that. So it's been a full month of events. One of the activities that some of our high school students participated in with Unified Sports was to attend the Youth Leadership Summit. And this is students coming together to learn more about unified clubs and sports, but also to engage in a day of activities together to strengthen their programs back in their district or maybe even start new ones. And so we had a group of students who went with a few of our teachers, and then they came back and they presented at a panel, and Principal Schmidt just left the room, but to all of the teachers at Wilsonville High School, they asked the students to present at a panel questions like, what does inclusion mean to you? Where do you find success in school? How does unified sports impact you? And to hear students sharing back to us how important this club and these sports are was, talk about being inspired, Christy. It was just to hear it from students that this is something we organized a number of years ago, but how it's really become a fabric of the lives of our students and how much they look forward to these events. And when we asked, where do you feel often the most included? A number of them will say, when we play unified sports. And it didn't matter if it was a student with a disability or one without, there was equal response of it's a place where there truly is no judgment, everyone's having fun, and there is this sense of everyone pulling for each other. So it was great to have our youth go and then to come back with more ideas to strengthen those programs. You've mentioned Dia de los Muertos, and that it's just not anymore for Wilsonville High School. There were West Linn students there, there were families whose children participate in the district world language program or the dual language program across the district, an opportunity to see their children perform or to just celebrate. And I appreciate seeing so many of you there. I really think about how we've elevated the status of culture and heritage, and students feeling proud. And then this year, the Wilsonville High School students actually organized a lot of the event. They're ASB students, and that made a big difference as well. And then we've got our little mariachi band on the bottom there, playing their hearts out. So a really nice and great event. And each year it just gets bigger and bigger, and we keep wondering if we can actually do it in that venue, or if we might have to move it somewhere. So it was really great. Small little event there, wouldn't you say? Our Wilsonville High School principal was a good sport this year about a challenge with Battle for the Bridge, Principal Newman. And I got to attend a breakfast and a lunch. This is a big deal between Westland High School and Oregon City, a very long-standing rivalry, and the mayors read a proclamation. And we prevailed. We beat Oregon City Friday night. And it was a good game and good fun. I think what my favorite part actually was at the halftime show, the Oregon City junior dancers and the Westland junior dancers performed together. And so everybody was cheering at halftime for this group. And somehow they had learned the routine, and then it was maybe their first time performing it together, but they were all in sync, whether they were wearing red or green, to have the junior dancers all together. And so it was a great example of spirit across a rivalry that is still about coming together and being a community. So I wanted to thank our Rotaries and the Oregon City Elks Club for hosting those events and making it really fun for students and the community. This month, we took on doing our own learning around equity. There are a number of events, and some of you mentioned the ones that you were able to attend. I'm just going to pass out. This is the day's brochure of the Multi-City Equity Summit. I want to thank Chelsea for being there and representing the school board and attending. We also had Jules Walters from Westland City Council, Kristen Ackervall from Wilsonville City Council, Mayor Russ Axelrod was there, and then a number of many other community members. I pass it out because I think just in your own leisure at times, just to see who some of the speakers were. And then at some point when we want to think more about our own learning, this is a great resource for us. These are local speakers, keynote people who do equity work that maybe we would want to, we've talked about as staff, who would we want to bring in to help us continue learning? There may be some of these speakers who we could bring in with different purposes. So it's worth having that. The ESD training, thank you, Director Thompson, for being at that. That was with Brad Brown and John Welch from the Puget ESD. And they do these kind of entry trainings for school boards who may not know much about early equity conversations. So it was kind of a soft start into that work, and had just some stories to share about how they've moved the work in their region and how they continue to support school districts. And one of the items they passed out was this idea of how do you move along a continuum of being an anti-racist multicultural institution. And one of the documents I gave you before was a rubric for school boards, something from the Center for Equity and Inclusion. This is also an idea of continuum. So as we kind of gather these items together in our experiences and you think about that goal that you have around learning more, some of these documents might help us shape our next learning together, or if there's something here that you see that might put words to ideas that we have around our equity work. And then lastly, this was Director King went to John Lenson's workshop that she mentioned, but Guidelines for Being Strong White Allies was a resource that he handed out that we've since also shared as staff. So again, just to tuck away in a folder to read at some point, and then as we keep thinking about our work together, moving the mission forward, disrupting systems of racism, what are some of those resources we have available to us to help us guide that work? I don't believe anyone from the board, and I wasn't able to attend the evening with Tim Wise. He did come through Multnomah ESD. we'll inquire to see how that went, and if he's someone that's worth bringing at some point, we can think about that. But on the next slide, I just want to remind folks that at the upcoming OSBA convention, there is a strong emphasis on equity. And the first keynote speaker on Friday, Bryant Marks, is talking about hidden biases of good people. So if you do make that keynote, I think you'll hear some of the same themes from some of the other seminars, as well as some good resources. And then Saturday's keynote is a gentleman talking also about autism. So another way of thinking about equity in terms of not race, but maybe in terms of life experience. So they look like two really good, strong keynote speakers. And I believe Kelly is able to register you for the convention. If you are able to go, the conference, let her know. I will be at the Friday, all-day Friday event. So Thursday, I believe, is just pre-conference for administrative. Yeah. So mostly, I think you would think about going Friday and perhaps Saturday morning or part of Saturday. And then I do believe we had committed to perhaps a work session to keep thinking about our equity work and the goal you had made. Okay, next slide. We keep moving around high school renewal, and you've mentioned that as you were talking about the superintendent study. Look at all these goodies you're getting tonight. And I keep doing my best to keep you in the loop around the work that we're doing with the high school renewal. And so I made a little visual. It probably could have been made on a smaller piece of paper, but this is a Thanksgiving placemat for you, I guess. You can put your plate on it or something. Are we one short? Okay. So we continue to take the work from that superintendent study, and if you see that blue bar going across that says programs, school day, and internships, if you remember, those were some of the findings that came out of that superintendent study. How do we adjust our program so it includes more CTE and pathways? How do we think about the school day, maybe more flexibly in light of some expanded options? And then internships as we help learning become more relevant in the workplace. And you've hopefully seen some movement in those three. And then you'll see the three schools at the top. And then as we think about over the course of the years, following down that yellow arrow, what's the work that we're doing so that 3 years from now, where would we like to be? You'll see that we have identified career pathways at all three schools. So we have to kind of undo, there's a little bit of a narrative still out there that we only are going to have one CTE school, that the new Art Tech is going to be the CTE school. And as much as we can repeat that actually we're going to have career pathways at all three, the enlarged Art Tech High School allows us to actually expand the programs there and do some of that at Art Tech. So you'll see the career pathways that will be highlighted at each of the schools. It would be great if we could do all things at every school, but that's just not realistic with staffing and scheduling. And then you'll see that there are CTE courses, dual credit, and AP classes at all three schools. Some of them will be connected to those pathways. This idea of ninth grade success teams at all three schools. Currently, we have not implemented them at Art Tech because they don't have a ninth grade cohort, but the idea would be how do we implement those at all three schools. And then recently we've been delving into blended learning, hybrid learning, which is online and brick and mortar. So you're with teacher and you're online, and also online learning. So we've been reading some text, we've been doing some visiting, and we're going to begin engaging our high school principals in that idea. The next slide just shows you in bigger font what's on that chart. We will have a work session together where we will take each of those ideas and we'll go more in depth, and you can engage in that and ask questions, and we'll have more examples. So today is just a preview, just to remind you that we're deep in that work. We haven't suspended anything. For example, if you recall last spring, I told you about a trip that we took to Harmony campus at CCC, where we heard about their health career pathways and let them know that we were going to be looking at that for one of our high schools, likely Art Tech High School. But so what kind of a partnership could we begin? And we heard all about these programs and what we could do at the high school level that would give kids a start towards these health careers. And I'm excited to share that already this spring in our course catalog, we're going to take some of the classes that are offered in here and offer it to our students. So for example, in the pathway of emergency medical technology, EMT, in the spring we have a course already that's going to be offered to our high school students that is an introduction to EMS. And so one of their instructors will come and teach the class. So we're getting a little, just dipping our toe into what are some of the classes that we can partner already. And then there's another one where one of our school nurses and our health teacher at Art Tech are going to co-teach a class with a nursing emphasis. So it's a health class, but also a little bit of a pre-nursing emphasis. So we're trying things out as well as building this partnership so that when we move into that new space and we really realize all of these plans here, we'll have had some runway as well as some opportunity to start small and then scale. At the work session, we'll share more with you, but I wanted to just give you a little pre-taste of that. And this one, we're just going to go really fast because I feel compelled to keep repeating this message that we are paying attention to the Student Success Act. If you remember, there's 3 components of that. We're beginning the stages of our continuous improvement plan. And the next slide, it's going to have all those components in it. There's a template that the state gives us. We have to submit it by December 2nd. We're working on that timeline. Next. These are the same slides, by the way, you saw last month. So this is just a review. If you remember, a big part has to be a comprehensive needs assessment of our improvement plan, which is informing the community and getting feedback from them. So the feedback we're going to get through surveys from them, we wanted to wait until after the election because we've inundated our community with a lot of information about bond and local options, so we're staggering. After this week, we've got surveys queued up and ready to go where we need to ask our communities about these 5 priority areas and get feedback from them. We know we already have some needs assessment data from previous studies and surveys we've done, so we should acknowledge those as well as the survey that will go out in the next week or 2. In the meantime, we've also been making phone calls and some small focus groups. We've called migrant families, foster families, homeless families, and asked them some of these same questions. So we've done some small-scale phone and face-to-face surveys. But after the election, we'll do those large group ones. And then when our SIP is done and turned in and it's approved, then we can apply in January, February for the grant money that's available through the Student Success Act, and that's called the Student Investment Account. And based on those 5 priority areas, we can ask for money in those 4 buckets. If you recall, mental health and safety, class size, expanded learning opportunities, and well-rounded education. Thank you. And we'll present those to you. So I just feel like each month, if I just keep reminding us about what it's a big idea out there, it's easy to get it confused. That was the end of my long report. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. We will move on to the consent agenda, and I am actually going to pull the board meeting minutes from that and move that down in because Ginger had emailed of a change she had proposed to that. So at this time, it's just the personnel report on the consent agenda.
I move that we accept the remaining consent agenda of the personnel report.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Dylan Hides.
Aye.
Christy Thompson.
Aye.
Regan Molitor.
Yes.
Ginger Fitch.
Yes.
Chelsea King.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And we will now move on to communications and comments from the audience. And we have two guest speakers with us this evening. Were you going to come up together? Yeah, that'd be great. And if you'll just share your name and your address, that would be great. Yes. Yeah. And as we're passing that out, you can share with us when you'd like.
Thank you so much. I want to introduce myself first. My name is Sarah Taggart, and I'm the Prevention, Education, and Partnerships Manager at Children's Center. So thank you, Dr. Ludwig, for having us here tonight, and to the whole board for taking a few minutes of your time to allow us to share some information. I also want to introduce my partner in crime here, so to speak. This is Orlando Perez. He's one of our Children's Center board members and also a board member of the North Clackamas School District. So we're here to share, first of all, a big appreciation and thank you to the school district for being a long-term partner and supporter of children and also of Children's Center. So we go a long way back. If you're not familiar with Children's Center, there's a brochure in the pamphlet or in the folder that I just gave you. We're the designated Child Abuse Intervention Center for Clackamas County. Our mission, which is actually not updated in this pamphlet, is it used to be to provide medical assessment and supportive services anytime there were concerns of abuse or neglect for children in Clackamas County, but our new mission is to work to end child abuse and neglect through assessment, intervention, or assessment, therapy, and prevention. So we're really excited about turning this corner really with our community to say, we don't want to just be intervening, but we want to get ahead of the issue. So our appreciations to all of you, and we wanted to let you know a little bit about what you are partaking in. Recently, the district agreed to become a partner with us in our This Is All of Us campaign and event. And so I want to let Orlando say a little bit about himself and why he's involved, and then I'll just leave you with a few tidbits from the packet.
Sure, no pressure.
You've got, do we get a minute or two?
Okay. Hi, as Sarah mentioned, my name is Orlando Perez. I'm on the school board for North Clackamas, but tonight I'm here in my role of Board of Directors, Children's Center. Thank you for partnering with us. I'll say that for me, being a survivor of child abuse, I can say that every time a child is abused, be it sexually, physically, emotionally, psychologically, that child has to interpret what happened to him or her in silence more often than not. More often than not, that child who is violated or injured will have to interpret that more often than not in silence. And oftentimes, they will believe it is their fault and that they must have deserved this treatment, that they were somehow responsible for what happened to them. That they were responsible for this violation and or injury. But if we have a village, if we create a village to respond to this child who has been violated and or injured, a village that could respond immediately and let this child know that they're loved and cherished, and that what happened to them had nothing to do with him or her, but rather that what happened to them disappeared, in the sense that it remained superficial and did not penetrate beyond their skin. And it did not become a part of his or her story. village, a community conversation, which we thank you so much for becoming a partner. Coming together to discuss in what ways can we end child abuse, in what ways can we curb child abuse, or put a significant dent into child abuse. This will be a powerful opportunity for many folks in Clackamas County and many key partners to come together to discuss and how do we strengthen this village, this network of partnerships, so that the child who suffers that violation or injury will have that village that responds immediately, so that they feel loved and accepted and respected and supported and valued, so that that child's story will be heard. That village is necessary so that child does not have to interpret in silence what has happened to him or her, but rather the village will help that child to see his or her value, and that the wound stays superficial and does not penetrate the skin and impact the child's soul for the rest of his or her life. So thank you for being a partner in this community conversation that we have coming up. And I will say, lastly, I probably have taken up too much time, but I will say, lastly, we invite you to come for a tour to the Children's Center. That's how I got to know about the Children's Center and the work, incredible work they do for the children, and for the children to be listened to and their stories to be heard, and for them to come first. Thank you.
Thanks, Orlando. So just to, the words that Orlando shares with us are ones that can't be, I mean, there's nothing I can say except that I'm with you, I'm here with you, and that Children's Center's with other children that have gone through this as well. And as I said earlier, we don't want to continue to hear this story again and again and again. Not Orlando's personal story, but the story of abuse and neglect. And so we really want to get upstream on this, and we need partners in education to do that. Law enforcement will never solve this problem. DHS will never solve this problem thoroughly, but educators make up 52% of the people who make reports to DHS. In order for Children's Center to help a child, we need your help. But more importantly, we want to be the community that creates that network underneath children so that this doesn't happen in the first place. So one of the things that we're asking for your support in is something that would engage young people in a positive way to help us think about the future of what a community will look like when all children are safe, valued, and heard. And they can do that through an art project. So I've shared this with the principal, with Ms. Dressler at Arts Tech, and we're inviting any artist of any age to submit your vision of what your community will look like when all children are safe, valued, and heard. And that's part of our This Is All of Us campaign. So if you go to the Children's Center's website or look at any of the information in the packet here, that's the first way to get involved, because we won't know where we're going if we haven't had a conversation about what that future looks like. And then the second way is that the district will be able to have 2 folks join us in March for the Accelerator event. And we encourage you to get in touch with me if you think of other folks who might like to join us. As a partner, you're going to send 2 folks, but we're going to open up the invitation to others who bring in different voices that we might not be in touch with right now. So please let us know if you want to participate in some way, or you know folks in your community who would like to participate. And over time, we're just going to keep this drumbeat going. And maybe we'll be back in a year, and we'll be celebrating all of the amazing things that you've done with your safety team, that you've done with your focus on equity, because we know the roots of child abuse are very tied to the roots of inequity. And so we'll be celebrating all the great things that you all are doing with us together. So thank you for giving us so much time, and I'm happy to provide materials to anybody else who would like them here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. This is a good time for me to remind people that I'm an attorney. I practice abuse and neglect law. I represent sometimes students and parents in our district, and a matter may come before the board that materially benefits one of my clients, and in that instance, I would not participate in the deliberation or the decision without revealing who my client is. But on that note, thank you for coming, and I remind the school board members as well, educators already know that they are mandatory reporters of child abuse and neglect. I was at a recent meeting this Saturday. The hotline hour-long wait continues for many of us. And some people who were present at that meeting, attorneys and judges, are circumventing the child abuse hotline and calling law enforcement directly to try to get their reports made. And they're continuing to work on it at DHS, but it continues for some to be considerably long. So just note that if you're not able to wait that long, find another way to get your report promptly made. Thank you.
All right, now we're under new business, and I'm going to return, if we could, real fast just to those meeting minutes and get that resolved, and then we'll move on to the agenda as it's laying out. Ginger, did you want to?
Yes. In terms of the minutes, the bullets, points down at the bottom of the minutes, I don't know if I can pull it up. Where are they on our board book? Their consent agenda.
I think it's page 12.
On page 12.
Maybe, hold on.
Yes, I would just ask for a change. Thank you. That provides that it doesn't reflect a consensus of the board. So that instead of saying the board would like to have a count per building, a board member raised that request.
So would you just do me a favor and put the two, I think there's the two bullet points, both of them together, that just say the board, and are you able just to put that in a motion, like I move to approve these minutes with the changes of?
Yes. I vote to approve the minutes from the
October 7th.
October 7th meeting, with the following change of the two bullet points on page 12, changing the board to a board member requested to have.
There a second?
I'll second that.
It's moved and seconded. Discussion?
I thought that we had talked about it, and we took a vote, and 3 of the 5 of us wanted the district office to move forward with those things.
There was no vote that took place during that meeting. I did say, I recall, I absolutely get what you're saying, because there was not board action, and as you read it, it is as if the board was directing. What we did have a discussion about was how you, Christy, and I were interested in, at some point, getting data on these clears. And and I heard agreement from the staff saying we're working on collecting that data, but it wasn't, I just feel like this is a much stronger statement than what, because there wasn't an actual vote. As well as this change would reflect both Ginger and Chelsea, who also kind of chimed in with a different perspective on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad for it to say the board majority, but I didn't feel like it was a board consensus.
All right.
Could I add something as staff? Yeah. I do recall hearing interest on the part of several board members. How do we know that what we're doing is making a difference in terms of all the efforts that were expressed and shared in the report that evening? Room clears was an area of just wonderment because of community had brought that forward as an example of where things weren't going well in their mind, and how do we know these efforts might make a difference, for example, in room clears or in other areas. So what we heard as staff, and we debriefed afterwards, is how do we get information to you about the efforts we're making, but also the gains that we're making. So I just want you to know that's on our docket to come back and report that to you. We will do that in a public meeting. So how you reflect in the minutes, whether it was an official vote or an ask, the staff did hear board members express that they'd like some more conversation or the staff to come back with an update on that and addressing some of those questions. And we're prepared to do that, regardless how you change the official wording in the minutes. So.
All right, moved and seconded. We're closing discussion? Or did you have more? Okay. Would you please call it for a vote?
Dylan Hives.
No.
Christy Thompson. Yes. Reagan Molitor.
Yes.
Ginger Fitch.
Yes.
Chelsea King.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. And now for the assessment update with Dr. Swayson and Dr. Downs.
Got a lot of things. So the purpose of our presentation this evening is to refine our lens a little with looking at yes. Okay. So the idea of this evening is to look at, and just the time of year it is when the state report cards came out, to refine our lens a little bit with how we look at data, and also to talk about this idea of indicators, with the idea that an indicator is meant to talk about a measure that's linked to an outcome. And more importantly, with the way that there has been a shift from No Child Left Behind to ESSA, to look at how local school districts are involved in looking at things and developing indicators and measures in the context of their local communities. And that's been a big change. Also, in looking at an indicator, is that indicator something that is considered to be really important, really that matters? And so there's a process of doing that. So just a little bit of the background is knowing that the Every Student Succeeds Act followed No Child Left Behind. There was a lot of policy behind that at the national level. And some of the policy talked about the idea of accountability a little bit differently. And they talked about accountability coming in 3 areas: For your resources, are you using, and for schools, are you using your staffing resources? Are you using your program resources equitably and effectively? And also our professional accountability. Are we looking at how we are having a systematic way, and this relates to district goal number 2, are we looking at how we are keeping track of what we're doing? Not just what the outcome is, but what we are doing and tracking, are we getting any better? So when you go on Tuesday walkthroughs and you look at, are you seeing these practices, are we also looking at the consistency of practices and practices that are actually linked to what is known in a really evidence-based document like the 5 Dimensions of Teaching and Learning? Are we doing things that we know work? And then the third piece of this emerging accountability is what they call meaningful learning. And that term is used instead of just assessment or achievement data, to ask districts and schools to look at what things lead to life beyond K-12 education, further education and/or college and careers. And so it's in that spirit that we wanted to just go over a few things, but also be really clear at the outset that we hope that you say, you know, we would like some more data about or some evidence of, because the purpose of this evening is not to show you all the data behind all these indicators that we're going to point out. We stayed within the ones pretty much that are on the school report card and the ones that we already have. But we want to talk towards those and then have not just a look at the report card glance, but to get some feedback and information as to how we can continue to look at this.
So as we think about this conversation, we just appreciate helping to think through together as we look at interpreting so many great things that we're working on. But specifically, we want to talk about this coherence, and it's across our district. And what I'd like to just highlight to start, kind of as maybe as a frame for our conversation tonight, is this continuous improvement. And across our entire system, one thing we had this summer was an opportunity to submit a SIP plan, or a continuous improvement plan. And we focused and we were working a lot with Arts and Technology High School. And what we did is try to pull back and as a district say, what was a goal that we could kind of ground ourselves in. And just wanted to share this with you as we kind of move into the next couple of slides. I want you to have an opportunity to read this. But basically, we're saying we want all students to graduate from high school within 4 years, prepared, with plans, and actually, what's your first thing you're going to do? Give me some initial actions for post-K-12 learning, careers, and meaningful participation in their communities and in the world. And we just love the connection and the nexus with our mission. And we know that it actually follows from that specifically, and it aligns with directly. And from a high school perspective, it's so important for us to not only know the students when they're walking across the stage, and you as a board have an opportunity to be up there at that moment, but to know them by name, to know them to what's their next initial plan, what are they wanting to do. So not only do we take pride in actual graduation, but we take pride in thinking about this as a plan. And so as we talk about this, as we think about the whole child, as we think about how does this mission really expand, we wanted to use this as a frame for tonight.
So these indicators, the ones that come from national, are from the Every Student Succeeds Act. But the idea here is then you look at what are your district goals. And we have our 4 district goals. And specifically for this one, it's goal number 1. Also, we have worked with, Dr. Ludwig has had us work with a work plan for several years. And so the idea has been formalized a bit more now with this idea of a continuous improvement plan. But the idea behind that is when you look at the mandates of the ESSA, which really says you have to have some state assessment data that you use, and then develop at the state level, and that's through the state of Oregon, developed the Oregon School Report Card, and that was a several-year process. They had, Salam Noor went around the state of Oregon and held community meetings, and they made a video, Tell Us, and they elicited feedback from communities. And this was kind of a precursor to what communities are now asked to do with the continuous plans that we are submitting. And this came from ESSA saying, we know that we can't just look at fixed data set in time, and we know that we have to look at the context of a community to do that. So a lot of it is on engagement. And in the Oregon School Report Card, you'll see that there's some things that you've seen before on report cards that aren't that different, but there's also some emerging pieces where they are asking for further and further description of what is it that makes your school district unique. And when you look at then a district's continuous improvement plan, it's also intended to look at how do we look K-12, not just at that outcome at the end that was on, just mentioned, but what are the pieces that we think matter most to work towards that here, and then that decides how do we look at those other pieces, the professional accountability, the use of resources. And that again, came from the policy that was behind ESSA. And so finally, our school work plans, which you're engaged in looking at now, you'll see pieces that come from, oh, that seems to be something that when I look at the school district's report card, and when I look at this, I see something that is familiar. You'll see in some cases that a subject area is mentioned, and you might see work at a certain level or at schools where they're really focusing on that. You'll also see that there might be some where they're working more at things that cut across subject areas, differentiation, level of rigor and depth of knowledge, pacing, ensuring that curriculum is paced so that there's new learning for students every day while also ensuring that there's access. So that's some of the language that you have been seeing in the work plans, and that's what, at the school level, we're to be looking at. The other thing, and the reason that we started out by asking for you to consider asking what do we want to know more of is, in our district, we use this idea of a cycle of inquiry, not just to wait and annually look at the data. PLC work involves looking at data all the time, and the cycles of inquiry are also ways to look more specifically at how plans are working.
And as we do look at that, I think it's important to go back to a little conversation that some of us have had previously, thinking about assessment. So what should we be focusing on? What should we have an emphasis on? And I just want to let you know that for us, it's extremely important that and it's kind of demonstrated here, the formative assessment, and as Barb has mentioned a couple things, but even when many of you've done your blue time walkthroughs with our learning walks with our principals and in their schools, we know that the formative piece of our assessment is actually very, very telling for us, because actually it gives our educators the most to work with. It gives us the most to work with as we kind of do checkpoints along the way. And so for us, we spend a lot of emphasis on our formative assessment. It actually helps guide our work. It's the next highest leverage move. What are we seeing? What are we experiencing? So then when you come and have been a part of that, I think you were able to join in with us on that. This, by the way, is not meant to be an exhaustive list of maybe what are formative, interim, and summative assessment points. But for us, I think we have interim allows us to have more of this a checkpoint along the way. For an example, would be a map data and map testing. Summative is that end, final exam. It's SBAC. It's you have an AP test you take. It's kind of the end examinations. Or maybe a big portfolio that people put together. And all of these actually are helpful. They're all, for us, the recommended assessment emphasis is actually on the formative side. And that actually does allow us to allow the teachers to adjust their practices and allow us to adjust our practices along the way.
And just a couple things to add to that. This is something that we didn't invent this. This comes from that policy shift with the Every Student Succeeds Act. After the years of No Child Left Behind, saying, well, where did that get us? And did we actually see that improvement? And the idea was, keep track of things that are happening in real time and make adjustments based on them. The other thing is, we don't want to imply that summative assessment is not important and that we don't look at that. Like, you know, we know that it matters how a student will do on, say, an ACT exam. We know that Smarter Balanced is a piece that's tied to high school graduation here. But what it means is pay attention to, for example, the level of rigor and how do things that students do in the classroom daily match up to what they ultimately have to do. And that's the reason for emphasizing this work with formative and the idea of practice. And if we don't give feedback and we don't look at or we don't make adjustments until the end. So what this means for us is doing a lot more work with what is the quality of the tasks we have students doing daily, K-12. And that's literally something that you will see and have seen, I think, on some school work plans and task analysis. And that's what that means. It's related to that.
We then get into talking about what do we look at for indicators. And for us, we look at some national and state evidence-based indicators. And again, to build off of our previous work here, you know, this is not, we didn't come up with this, but these are indicators that actually have some great evidence behind it. So we look at our attendance. We also look at our grade 3 reading. We use Smarter Balanced for that. Grades 5th and 8th for math, Smarter Balanced. And then for high school, we look at our 9th grade on track. And for us, that means 6 credits earned. You know, so at the end of a full year, as a high school freshman, what we call credit whole. You know, do they have their 6 credits earned? And then maybe they earned a credit in the summer or before school or some other way, but do they have 6 credits by the end of their freshman year? And that's an indicator for us. And then lastly is our graduation rate, our 4-year graduation rate. And these are actual indicators for all, and they do include all learner groups.
So Dr. Ludwig made reference earlier to the high school renewal. And in the course of the high school study and in looking at what started as Measure 98 and then the High School Success Act, we took at that juncture, and we had started using some information that we already had, and she made reference to that as well. What we realized was we needed to get better at our own, and this again goes back to district goal number 2, our own system of assessment and accountability, and look at, well, what are we measuring? And how are we deciding that that's important to measure? So for that reason, we did a project that involved all of our school leaders, and actually in working with the project, we didn't just get the data itself and finding out what they found out about us, but then we worked with, at every school level, with our leaders to look at how does this relate to your school? And how does this relate then to your work plan? And this fall, you'll see evidence of this, and this study that we did with Education Northwest. And Education Northwest is a regional education lab, and they have them around the country, and they provide a lot of the resources, a lot of the researchers, a lot of the data points to support schools in a region. So Education Northwest works with the states of Alaska, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington. And their researchers tend to be, maybe they've worked with RAND Corporation, but they've definitely worked with within education and outside of education with looking at this idea of how do you actually look at and find evidence. So what our team here did is met with them, let them know that, you know, we're at this juncture right now. We have this high school success. We know it's K-12. And we want to pay more attention, having seen some of these ideas from moving from No Child Left Behind to ESSA. So they have the power and the statistical analysis orientation to take data and do that. So they took 14 years of our data from starting in 2004, and they looked at putting it in, it's running a bunch of regression analyses, if you're familiar with that. And what you do is you put things in against each other to see what surfaces. And want to credit Curtis Nelson here with really doing a lot of work to make this available and to help work with this. And it also informs us a lot and has led into work that Curtis is doing, because you find out about your own system. And some of the needs assessments that we are now doing for continuous improvement, they require that school districts have looked at, so what's your system for even keeping track of this? So that was the reason we decided we needed to start practicing and finding that out. So what they came up with tends to be robust and statistically sound. And the other thing that we wanted to be really clear about is we wanted this to inform us at every level of education. So the things that we found, though, were attendance matters. And we'll talk about attendance more later and what we actually mean by attendance. A big one for us was MAP, reading, and math, but it was the growth. And looking at, and what that means is, a way to think about this is there would be, and we can provide more detailed information on this, but for example, it would say attendance at grades K1 and 2 predicts how students will do on grade 3, smarter balanced reading and math. So there's kind of a stack up here of one thing leading to another. So the MAP reading and math growth then predicts students passing math and language arts in middle school. And as these things build, then it's the taking either advanced, and we have advanced and AP coursework because this is 14 years of data. So we had some ways of considering things advanced that we no longer have. And then looking at grade point average in high school is another one. And those are just a couple of the big ones. The other thing that this led to is we then have, in analyzing these, some what we would call emerging evidence-based indicators. And again, linked to the high school renewal and some of the talking with students and some of the data we have, but we want to be real careful to say here that we now are looking at consistently and coherently collecting that data. And so CTE and dual credit enrollment matters. Course of study matters. That's coming through really strongly. Students who earn the biliteracy seal, that matters. And that's also something that we have seen great growth in our district. Co-curricular engagement, that means activities outside of school, not just how we're doing in school subjects. One that is starting to emerge, social emotional learning. Dr. Spencer Iams is taking the lead on this in working with a systematic way of collecting and gathering that information, because one thing that we're seeing is the ideas of engagement and persistence are words that are coming up a lot. Engagement is related to attendance, and this came out of our data from Education Northwest, that the idea of not just coming to school, but getting to school, and then how students are involved in and engaged in school. And persistence means things like, did I register for a course? Did I finish the course? Did I take the exam for the AP course? Did I start college or some sort of post K-12 learning? And then did I stay? You may have heard the evidence lately of a lot of students starting college and not finishing. And so that's the word persistence in this context. That's what it's talking about, is what are the things that lead to that? And there are factors in social emotional learning. Are students making progress? So when we're talking about student behavior, and you heard that mentioned as lagging skills, how are we then measuring it and then looking at how does that inform how we will work with those lagging skills? And then lastly, there's two ways. There's growth and trends within cohorts in interim and summative assessments. When we look at smarter balance data, that's a point in time. And the 7th graders this year were not the same 7th graders last year. So when you see those scores compared, you're looking at a different group of students. When you see cohorts, that's where you're saying, I'm going to look at these 3rd graders and go through 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. We are informally seeing some of that now, especially in the area of mathematics, and we're seeing it positively, and we're seeing it in areas for growth, where we see patterns within cohorts of students start to emerge as early as 3rd grade. So that's what that means. That's one that we are paying attention to. And right now, we can do that with the Smarter Balanced Assessment. The interim MAP assessment gives us actually an easier way to do that. It's given 3 times a year. They're set up to show growth.